investigating crimes linked to the Post Office Horizon IT scandal are looking at dozens of potential suspects, but don't expect trials to begin until 2027. Peter Ruddock, our business reporter who's been following the ins and outs of the Post Office inquiry, has the latest.
Hi Will, this is another really big moment in the timeline of this scandal. It's not the beginning of police action. They opened their investigation back in 2020, but it is the beginning of a handover, if you like, between the inquiry and the police when it comes to the responsibility for chasing justice. We now know the scale, the direction of travel and the timeline of all this. So on the scale, more than 3,000 victims, 1.5 million documents over a nearly 20-year period, 100 officers from across the country and dozens of people now classified as persons of interest, potential suspects. On the direction of travel, the police are looking at the actions of investigators, solicitors, barristers, people involved with the Post Office and Fujitsu. They're investigating possible perjury and perverting the course of justice. But the timeline, if trials do happen, it won't be before 2027. The police say they have a lot to do and they have to wait for the inquiry, but that when it does report, they'll be ready to go. That won't stop the claims, though, of justice delayed being justice denied.
Our thanks to Peter Ruddock there, and as usual, he is the place to go, his Twitter account, for everything from the Post Office inquiry. We've covered it day in, day out, right throughout that scandal, so do give Peter a follow on X if you aren't already. Tim Brentnell from Pembrokeshire, one of those wrongly convicted Tims, helped us out on the programme, come on and told his story a few times, hasn't he, over the run of this scandal. His conviction for false accounting overturned in 2021. Tim, morning. Always great to have you back on the programme. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Will.
Is it that last bit that Peter was sort of breaking down there of the knowns that we know now, the timeline that perhaps is most frustrating to you and fellow former sub-postmasters?
Yeah, you're right. It's really frustrating in one hand because I was part of Alan's group action and we won our court cases back in 2019 and my conviction, as you rightly said, was quashed in 2021. So we're already looking at either 5 or 3 years. We're down the road since major events like that have happened. We then had the public inquiry, which initially, because we're just normal people, we didn't really understand the mechanism of that and thought that was perhaps the start of justice. But inquiries don't deliver things like that. That's left to the police. But able to look at it pragmatically, we were all victims of justice procedures that weren't followed properly. So if the police need time until 2027, 2028 to build these cases and evidence them so that justice can be served, then I think most of us would be prepared to wait for that.
Alan, of course, Alan Bates, or Sir Alan Bates, as he is now. The problem is, I guess, that no one involved is getting any younger. And kind of tragically, we've heard one of the many really sad elements of the public inquiry, Tim, has been hearing from people or people's family members of people who are no longer here to see some of that justice be served.
Yeah, that's very sad. I mean, we heard nearly every week in the inquiry that a member of our cohort had passed away because people tended to take on post offices as a retirement plan or perhaps a way of giving back to their community once they'd reached retirement. So most people caught up in this scandal were in the later or the autumn years of their lives. I mean, I'm 43, so I can afford to wait for compensation and I can afford to wait for justice. But the cruel thing is many people in my position can't afford to wait. They're quickly running out of time.
We've got to be a bit careful because it's potentially about to become a set of live legal circumstances, and I don't want to get you, me, or anybody else on the programme in any trouble here. But the scope, in broad terms, without naming names, is the scope wide enough, do you think, of what you've heard in terms of who the police might be looking at, what the scope of what this investigation will look at?
Well, yeah, I mean, they were very good. Although I couldn't make it, the team behind this investigation came to the last meeting that Sir Alan Bates had a few weeks ago, and then for the people that couldn't make that meeting, that they held over the last few weeks a series of Zoom meetings to sort of try and allay these concerns that we had. And I was assured when I asked the question that the police said they will follow the evidence down to any level of employee or level of personnel that the evidence takes them to. Just so as a personal example, I was one of the people during my interviews by the post office investigators that was told I was the only person that had a problem like this. I was young and naive and didn't really understand what was happening to me at the time, and sort of laid it out to the person interviewing me, saying, I don't understand what's happened. The only thing I know is, I haven't acted criminally. And he shut that down by saying, well, you're the only person that this has happened to. And the police said, well, if that can be shown that someone at that level said that to two people, then we'd be looking at a perverting the course of justice charge, because clearly you can't say you're the only person to more than one person. So that there are a lot of people that call for the figureheads in this, people that we've seen in the inquiry, who perhaps are board members or heads of departments and things in the post office, and they sort of seem to be the figureheads, and people want to see heads on sticks, as it were. But the police said that of course people like that, if they're culpable, they will go after, but not just those sort of big trophy names. Perhaps they're looking at at any level where people have committed. I mean, they're looking at two offences. They're looking at perjury and perverting the course of justice as their main charging offences through this. But they said, there could be dozens of people.
Yeah, as we say, we're going to get much more clarity on the kind of the scope and the who's and what fors as we go on. I just wonder from your side, Tim, just looking through the BBC piece on this on the way in to the studios this morning, some real frustration. One of the reasons you're always a compelling listen when you come on the program is you always seem remarkably measured for someone who's been through what you've been through. But is there a danger that the kind of unity between all of you victims, former sub postmasters, begins to crack a little bit under what's another kind of sort of ratcheting up of pressure here? As you say, people quite understandably want to see something done and want to see something done quite quickly, and yet the reality is if the scope really is as wide as you're talking about there, people right down the ranks of various organisations, this is very likely to be a very drawn out process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed because Sir Alan's group was a group of 500 of us, and we're talking a group of thousands of people that have been affected now, and as of yet, we haven't had those cracks appearing. Yes, of course, there are differences in opinion, and sometimes people want a different approach. But up until now, we've all been able to put sort of the good of the group at the forefront of our minds. But I think you're very right. As time goes on. And we did see some evidence during the meetings via Zoom that we had with the police. Some people, are really incensed by the amount of time that they're told this will take. And it is a fear that, these fractures may appear. But at the moment, as a whole, we are able to stick together as a group and try and work towards justice.
And just on that, 1 year on, almost 1 year on, isn't it? It was Christmas last year that the drama ran, or right in the early of the new year. How have things changed for you personally in that year?
Well, we still have this wave of public support that the drama enabled, and I'm convinced, as many of us are, without the drama happening, we wouldn't have seen the overturning of convictions en masse. We wouldn't have seen the compensation or redress schemes move as far forward as they have. In the last year, the Post Office and the government, I think, were quite prepared to use the inquiry as a reason to keep kicking this down the road, to say we've got to wait for the inquiry to finish. And it was only when that mass sort of shift in not public support, because we've always had the public support, but the public understanding actually how terribly the post office behaved towards us from what the drama showed has moved a lot of things on. But personally, in the last 12 months, my full claim has been submitted to the post office. I received my first offer a few weeks ago, and it came in at under 20% of my claim. So it still feels like, people in my position are in litigation against the post office, and it still feels like, despite what is said publicly, it feels like we've got a huge fight to get anywhere near the full, fair or final redress that they like to talk about publicly.
Yeah, it does. I'm sure it's something, as a result, we'll have you back on the programme to chat about again, I hope, Tim, in the future as well. Always great to get your thoughts. Thanks so much for your time, as always. Tim Brentnell, former sub-postmaster from Pembrokeshire, one of those who had his conviction overturned as part of the original grouping of sub-postmasters with Alan Bates back in 2021. Tim's conviction overturned there. Still a long way to go, isn't there, in that story? Louise, let's turn back